This is Gene Monterastelli, and welcome to the Tapping Q&A podcast, recorded live to tape from Williamsburg in Brooklyn. This is episode 616, originally aired June 19th, 2024. Hi, everyone. I hope this finds you well wherever you are, and whatever time of day you're getting a chance to listen to this. Thanks for spending a little time with me today. Today, I have a really fascinating conversation about using tapping for fear and performance and putting yourself out in the world and how to use it daily. But before we do that, I need to give you a little context about this particular conversation because it's different than the ones that we normally have here on the podcast. So I love magic. I've loved magic my entire life. I learned my first card tricks when I was 10 years old. Anytime there is a magician nearby, I'm going to go and watch them. It's just, I love watching it. I love learning it. I love performing it. And so when the global pandemic happened, I actually reconnected with my love of magic. I was stuck at home like most of us were. And so I started digging out old books and old props and just really re-engaged with my love of magic. And it just really brings me a lot of joy, which may not be a great thing for the people in my life because sometimes it feels like I'm not doing magic for them, but I'm doing magic at them. That's another story altogether. And so in the process of this, I found my way to a number of magic podcasts. And so a few weeks ago, I was walking around my neighborhood and I was listening to the Penguin podcast, which is produced by a magic company. And the host, Erik Tait, was answering a question about stage fright and what do you do about stage fright? And he mentioned that as he was getting ready for FISM 2022, which is the premier, and I mean the premier magic competition in the world, he mentioned that in getting ready for that, his therapist had taught him some post-hypnotic suggestions and had taught him tapping. So I sent him a note on Instagram and I'm like, do you have a few minutes? I would love to have a conversation with you about this. And he immediately agreed. And so we're going to get into that in just a moment. Now, if you are new to tapping, you have no idea what this is that I'm talking about. All you need to do is follow the little red arrow in the upper right-hand corner. That will take you to learntotap.com. There, I have a very simple instruction that will teach you tapping so it's something that you can start to use in your daily life. Now, like I said, Erik is really, really good. And when I say really good, I don't just mean he's entertaining because he is. He's one of the not only best performers, but one of the funniest performers you're going to encounter in magic. But in addition to that, he has appeared on Penn Teller Fool Us. He's won the International Brotherhood of Magicians Golden Cup competition, and he competed in 2022 in the FISM World Championships of Magic, and in his category, he actually finished third, which is absolutely amazing. And so the reason why I wanted to reach out to Erik and have this conversation is he has over 2 decades of experience on stage as a juggler, as a stand-up comedian, as a magician. He has performed in so many different contexts, like national television, like Penn Teller. And what I thought was really interesting was he was comfortable in all of these settings. Why was this one setting? Why was this one competition something that was causing him enough emotional distress that tapping was a tool that he needed to introduce? And so we have that conversation, but there's actually more to it. It's not just about tapping for that particular fear. We get a chance to talk about failure and responding to failure and what we learn from failure, how we move forward, how we craft dreams. And so even if you are not a magic fan, even if you're someone who never wants to appear on a stage, I know you're going to get a lot out of this conversation. Now, Erik is currently on the road right now. He is in San Diego, California. And so the conversation we had was actually with him in San Diego between shows. And so I really appreciate the fact that he was willing to stop his busy schedule as a traveling performer to have this conversation. So I caught up with Erik on StreamYard, this really awesome platform that we use to record these conversations. And now you can join the conversation. Erik, thank you very much for your time, especially on the road as you're doing work. Before we get into the conversation, I just wanted to kind of set the table about who you are and how that impacts our conversation. Lloyd Barnes regularly says that most people get a chance only 2 or 3 times in their life to see a magician. And so we have a very specific kind of, this is what a magician is. When I think of you, I actually think of you in 3 different ways. The first is just because as a consumer of magic and magic training products, I think of you as just a really great trainer. anytime I'm in a circumstance that I see you doing instruction, I know that I'm in really, really good hands. Just because someone can do something doesn't mean that they can do it. Number two, I think you're a great performer. That I have not been lucky enough to see you live, but I've seen your recordings and stuff like that, and you are excellent at that. And then number three, I think of you as a really, really skilled sleight of hand magician. And to the layperson, like there are things that I could do and you could do, and to the layperson, it would look very, very similar. But there are things that I would do, and you do something in front of magicians, and they're like, oh, he's doing something simple. And you are doing something where they're going, why is he choosing to do something that is that hard when there is a simpler way to do it? Just because you're so incredibly skilled at sleight of hand and stuff like that. And so I guess my first question is, what made you interested in wanting to be able to do the really hard stuff in that particular way?
So I think part of this comes from the fact that I started off as a juggler. When I was in middle school, a husband and wife juggling team came to the school, and they taught an after-school program where people learned to juggle. And they kind of took me under their wing and got me into this whole performing thing. They used to go by Jesse and James on stage. Now they go by Mutts Gone Nuts. But Scott and Joan Houghton are my earliest mentors. And, juggling is sort of all about skill and, trying to increase like the number of things that you can do through practice, whether it's you start off with, 2 or 3 balls, and then you end up going to 5 and 6 and moving on to clubs and torches and rings and all kinds of things like that. So skill-based stuff has always sort of been in my background. And when I got interested in magic, I became very enamored with cards. They just felt right in my hands. It was sort of easy to work with. And around the time that I got really interested in magic was when the flourish movement was really on the rise. So you had Devo von Schottenreich and the Hand Lords website, Super Hands, and Jerry Satowski and the Encyclopedia of Playing Card Flourishes that gave birth to the cardistry movement, which is its whole own subgenre. And so very early on, I began mixing complicated and difficult flourishes with magic. And then sort of aside from that, one of my earliest, like most impactful experiences with a magician was NBC's World's Greatest Magic. This was a big special that was on every Thanksgiving. And I mean, people all across the country sat down to watch it. And one of the ones that I've always remembered was Leonard Green. Performing his FISM act, and Juliana Chen performing her FISM act. And while Juliana Chen is a stage manipulator and Leonard Green is a close-up magician, both of the things were so alien to everything else that I'd seen as a magician that really stuck with me over the years. And so when I began my journey on card magic, I immediately wanted to learn the stuff that they were doing. And so I kind of started doing hard stuff pretty early on. And this will sound a little arrogant, but I do practice a lot, but a lot of the more difficult moves tend to come very naturally to my hands. I think that I'm just very fortunate that my hands are shaped the way they are, and that they've had the experiences that they have, so that when I go to do things like the snap deal or palming or any sort of complicated shuffle work, I feel like my learning curve is a little bit shorter, but it's also just because I'm so fascinated by card magic and that I'm constantly fidgeting with it, that it's, and you do it over and over again, that it doesn't take long to get proficient with stuff if you're just kind of always doing it. And where other people fidget with different things, I fidget with a deck of cards. And so my practice is sort of on an unconscious level, always sort of working on that stuff. And the other thing is, very early on, because I always approached magic like a skill and not a mystery art, I wasn't afraid to do hard stuff in front of people and fail. One of the things that a lot of people get worried about is when they try and do hard magic or hard moves, they're worried that if somebody sees how it works, that the effect is ruined, or that they've destroyed magic for somebody. And the truth is, your audiences usually aren't 6. You're not crazy. Everyone kind of knows that what we're doing is not real. We're just engaging in a common consent that we're going to suspend disbelief. And so getting caught has never really mattered to me. And so getting like being able to do stuff without the fear of getting caught just meant that I was willing to take bigger risks with harder moves or more high concept or difficult stuff. And so, and when you do it over and over again and you start to lose the fear of doing it, then it's easier to do it, under fire, under more and more challenging circumstances. So that was a little long-winded, but that's kind of where
that's great. Yeah. And I'm guessing, like, when it comes to dealing with that failure, spending years as a juggler is helpful inside of that. I spent 20 years as a professional juggler, and, you have a really clever drop line and someone comes up to you afterwards and going, oh, you dropped on purpose so you could do that particular joke. Like you find your way into a circumstance where, one of the things I'm regularly tapping on with clients around fear is, and no baby seals died. Yeah. Like you fail enough publicly, you get into a circumstance that you recognize the consequence of that is significantly smaller than what you perceive it's going to be as you're stepping into that setting.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Like the more you fail, like failure is always a learning experience. And so like even when you have something, traumatic, like a relationship fail, you still learn stuff about yourself. And so failure is, and learning to treat failure as a learning experience early on, I think just changed my relationship with it. And so that's just kind of where it is. You're still sad when you fail, but you learn to learn from it.
Yeah, there's a proportionate response to the failure and just kind of recognizing its context. So being introduced to juggling very, very early on, moving into magic and stuff like that, early on in your career professionally and just doing stuff, was there any worry, stage fright, any of that sort of stuff early on? What did that look like early in your career? Because I now you're in a circumstance like, as you're creating stuff for Penguin Magic, you're like having to walk up to strangers and saying, I need to demo something that is brand new on camera. And like, for a lot of people, that's a scary setting. Like, what was kind of the art getting to the place where you are now, being comfortable in your skin as a performer?
I still have a fair amount of stage fright to this day,
Okay.
and I still, and I believe that stage fright is useful because it keeps you sharp. It's learning to manage that apprehension, fear, nervousness, however it manifests in your body, and being able to use it to in a positive way is the trick. And again, just doing stuff over and over again. When I was much younger, I participated in school theater programs, and so I ended up on stage a lot, and it was just kind of fun. And while I'm not religious, when I was much younger, I was raised in the Lutheran Church, and when they did like youth services, I frequently would end up in the category of the person preaching the sermon. Right. So whether or not it was written for me or I helped write it, depending on how old I was at the time, I very frequently found myself sort of in front of people on a regular basis. And being attracted to stand-up comedy and improv when I was younger, like especially in middle school and high school, and juggling at such an early age in front of people, the stage found myself found myself being naturally drawn to that kind of stuff. And so it was exhilarating and exciting and gave me, a sense of, accomplishment. But when it comes to like the close-up stuff, it's again, just doing it over and over again and understanding that failure is okay. These days I have a restaurant gig that I work on a regular basis, and learning to walk up to tables and introduce yourself in a way that breaks the ice. I walk up and say, hi, I'm so sorry to interrupt. My name is Eric. They told me to come find the most fun people in the dining room, and I found you. And that usually catches people off guard. Then I say, I'm a magician. Can I show you something? And they no longer think that I'm a manager who's about to ask them to quiet down, or if it's a group of women, they don't think that I'm a guy coming up to hit on them. It just sort of, the whole thing kind of disrupts their idea of what is going to happen, what happens when a stranger walks up to their table. And it frees them up to be open to an experience. And it took a while of learning, like walking up to people and being like, hi, I'm a magician. Can I show you magic? And them going, no, thank you. And then I wasn't like doing my job, which is to provide entertainment. So it took a long time of like trial and error to get there. And it's the same with other stuff. Like, learning to go on stage as a stand-up was and still is a very nerve-wracking experience, because you've only got your words to make these people entertained. And so, or doing a new piece is always nerve-wracking. It's just understanding that I have the experience to either make sure that I provide them with a solid experience, or that I have done this well in the past, I can do this well in the future. And just, doing it and accepting that failure is a possibility is the only way I can tell you to get over it. So,
yeah. So one of the reasons that I wanted to have the conversation with you is in your podcast for Penguin Magic, you were talking about getting ready for FISM and some of the stuff that you did. We're talking to a very lay audience when it comes to Magic. And when most people think of Magic competition, they immediately go to X Got Talent, America's Got Talent, Britain's Got Talent, which is a very, very different thing than the type of competition stuff that you have done in the past. For a lay audience, could you just kind of give some context to what does competition look like in this particular setting? And I'd be interested in why you were drawn to doing that sort of competition.
So in most Magic conventions, there is usually some sort of competition. And typically what it entails is, a number of magicians coming in, doing original material in front of a Magic audience, and then a panel of judges scoring them based on a predefined set of characteristics. So there's technical difficulty, originality, sense of magical atmosphere, audience effect, audience management. There's a couple of different things, and every competition is different. And the idea is that these criteria are set out ahead of time so that you can build your act towards that. And however, magic competitions are a highly artificial type of environment because A, you have a time limit. B, there are certain things that are or are not allowed, such as like you can or can't use fire, or you can or can't use glitter, or you can or cannot talk to the judges, or you can or can't, or you may or may not have to have what they call a bare stage to bare stage competition, where you've got a defined amount of time to set up your act, and then you have a defined amount of time to perform the act, and then a defined amount of time to tear it down so that the stage is completely bare again. And let's just be honest, you're performing for magicians, because the competition is, the people who are watching are the attendees of the convention, and the only people who are normally attending a convention are magicians. So you tend to make different kinds of magic that is going to be fooling to somebody who already has a base knowledge. And which is why a lot of times a great competition act doesn't work well in like a regular Magic performing scenario, because you're creating things that are designed to impress somebody with that base magical knowledge. And there's different sort of levels, sort of unofficially about this. There's like the competition in your local clubs, which are great fun, and then there's sort of convention level competitions, which have different amount of prestiges, and then there's international competition, and the sort of granddaddy of them all is FISM, which is it stands for Fédération Internationale Société de Magie. It's an umbrella organization that all of the other magic societies and organizations in the world are a member of. And every 3 years they hold a competition, which they call the FISM is the World Championships of Magic. It often gets called the Olympics of Magic. It is not related to the Olympics in any way, but it is widely considered the most prestigious and most difficult competition. And in 2022, sorry, I'll back up one real quick. In most Magic competitions, it's broken down into two major categories, close-up and stage. And then underneath that, they break it down further. And in close-up, you tend to have micro or general Magic, where there's not really like any defined type of characteristics. Parlor, which is stand-up. It's small, but you're still standing. There's no table. It's sort of like cabaret style. And then card Magic is its own defined category. And in 2022, the other thing is FISM moves around like the real Olympics, right? So it's held in a different city every 3 years. And in 2022, I traveled to Quebec, where it was, and I represented the United States in the category of card Magic. I took home third place, which is, I was competing against, some of the best magicians in the world. And as it would turn out, I'm the first American to win a prize in card Magic in 20 years and only the fourth to do it ever. So bringing home that prize was a huge honor for me. And I'm deeply humbled by the judges deciding that I deserved a prize at such a high level. When it comes down to why I compete, or why I used to compete, because I've largely retired from competing. Once you get to that level and win your prize, you kind of don't want to do it anymore.
Absolutely.
I originally started competing for the wrong reasons. I wanted to lecture, and I had sort of gained a reputation for doing complex, difficult sleight of hand, and I thought that I wanted to teach that because I love teaching magic. My original thought process was if I could do well in some competitions with complicated, difficult sleights, people would be interested in booking me to lecture. And that was not at all what happened because most magicians don't want to learn complicated, difficult sleight of hand for a wide variety of reasons we don't need to get into with this audience. But I began to earn a reputation as an innovative performer. And I ended up winning a fairly prestigious award called the International Brotherhood of Magicians Gold Cups Close-Up Champion. It's regularly considered about one of the third most prestigious competitions in magic, and it has the largest cash prize of any competition in the United States. And so that kind of put me on the map. And then I kind of thought I was done competing. And then I went to a magic convention where I performed what would become my FISM act again. And somebody by the name of Jones Caesar, who's a very influential magician on the international competition circuit, saw it and thought that I would be a good candidate to compete on behalf of North America at FISM. And she and a few other people kind of talked me into it because I'd always sort of viewed FISM as something for legends and really, really impressive people. And I never really considered myself at that level. I knew I was good, but I didn't think of myself as being in that class. And so when I decided to go compete, I was really deeply honored that many people thought that I should, and they were very impressed with the piece that I created. And so I decided to compete, and I read a lot about Olympians. And I decided that I would go compete for the experience, to say that I had done it, and to approach it with a mindset of I'm going to do as best as I possibly can. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to win anything because some 14-year-old Dutch kid no one's ever heard of is going to win everything anyway. And so that took a lot of personal pressure off me and just wanting to go participate and be a part of the experience. And then I won a prize, and that kind of changed my life forever and put me in history books and whatnot. So that's a long way to go to explain all of that, but there you go.
And I think I have this correct. At FISM, they don't necessarily give a gold medal. It's not like you were the third best person there. It's that in order to get that level, it's graded off of not just who happens to be on the stage on that day, but it's against the standard that says we're only giving this award if it is good enough. Because there are times in which someone can get third place and they're third place of something that is not necessarily a star-studded competition or a skilled competition. In this case, you got that because it wasn't you were the third best, but you were at a skill level that gets that particular award.
FISM has a very well-defined judging rubric compared to most other competitions. And there's actually a training program that judges go through in order to become FISM qualified judges. And the awards are based on two things. One is points value. So you've got different categories and the judges award you points. And so, and then of the competitors, then there's a certain point level that you have to get to be able to be awarded first place, same for second and same for third. It's been a while since I've gone back and looked at my score, but I think that I'm actually, even though I'm third place, I scored high enough to be considered second place equivalent. And you'd have to, don't quote me on that, you'd have to go back and check it. But I do know that there was a number of people who scored high enough to be third place equivalent and often bill themselves as that. But because my score was so much higher, I was the actual third place participant. So that's kind of how it works. It's very, very clearly defined. In the qualifying competition, I ended up taking second place overall, but other people who would have been considered fourth, fifth, or sixth place were still high enough in the points to qualify for the team. If that kind of makes sense. So
So the reason why I reached out to you is just in passing, you were talking to Nicola Capo on the Penguin podcast, Magic Podcast, and you just mentioned, oh yeah, getting ready for this. We did some hypnosis stuff and some tapping stuff.
Mhm.
And we had like, I don't know what this is going to be. I'm just curious. Like, what was the like? Why were you doing that sort of work ahead of time? What were you worried about?
Yeah.
What was the help that your your mental health care provider, like, what did you guys do? How'd you end up in that spot?
So in various interviews and on our own podcast, I've been pretty open about the fact that I have mental health struggles.
Mhm.
I'm classified as having dysthymic depressive disorder.
Okay.
They call it Eeyore syndrome. My brain just doesn't make enough, happy chemicals, and so I do a lot of cognitive therapy and I take some medications for it. And I'm pretty open about that because I've had some dark times, but I'm doing much better now, and I think everybody should be in therapy. And so I've been working with the same therapist for a little over a decade now. And when I started getting ready for FISM, when I qualified to participate in FISM, I noticed a couple of different things. One is that no matter how big or small the audience is, when I perform in front of magicians, I have a tendency to get the shakes really bad.
Mhm.
I may be able to appear to be very confident, but my hands will uncontrollably shake. And I, I love the book Starship Troopers, and there's a passage in the book where the main character talks about having the shakes right before he drops into combat, and his doctors talked about it as being like a racehorse in the like before the race actually starts, just getting ready to go.
Right.
And I had done this act in front of normal people for years, and I had no problem doing it in front of them. But whenever it went up in front of magicians, it really made me nervous. And I think part of that is that I view my own methods as not very clever and terribly brute force.
Mhm.
I'm just very good at palming cards and holding out, and I feel very comfortable secretly holding things in my hand. And I always feel like magicians can see it. That's not always the case, but I feel like they can. And so when I'm put in front of magicians, some of it is a little embarrassment or shame at being so just like direct in what I'm doing.
Mhm.
Whereas like I don't feel that in front of lay people. And so sort of remembering this thing from Starship Troopers, I was talking with my mental health care provider, my therapist, and I was like, look, after I qualified, I remembered that feeling of, I was like, if I'm going to really go compete, I need to get this under control, because I can do the sleights. I can, the scripting is all kind of worked out. The music and the lighting and the costuming are going to come together. I've got a really good support team around me. But what I have to do is actually focus on getting my mental game there, because most high level competition is mental preparation, not physical stuff. Because if you're competing at that level, you've already done all of the work to get there. Now it's just understanding how to compete at that high level. And so I went to my therapist and I said, this is what happens. This is what I want to work with. Can we look at post-hypnotic suggestion? And we did some of that.
Mhm.
And we put suggest. So I work at a table that is custom built for the act. There's nothing special about the table. It's just the right size. And
Yep.
for your audience, we don't need to go into this, but it is a soft table
Mhm.
that has green pool table felt over it. So it's got a specific wool feel. And so we tried to do some hypnosis and put a post-hypnotic suggestion so that when my wrist felt that feeling of that wool, that it would that my body would relax and I would calm down, which worked to some extent. But then my therapist introduced me to the concept of tapping, and so we went through it because and some of this is rooted in I'm a skeptic. I believe in science. There's some of the more ooh-woo aspects
Yeah.
of therapy that I'm just like really not into and don't connect with me. But she was able to sort of like give me examples and lay out how tapping like biochemically changes your body. And that was, belief in something is half of the battle. And so
Right.
we were able to use that in order to get me to calm down, and then transfer the tapping to being able to do it with just the fingers, so that when I was in that high pressure situation, I wouldn't have to, do the tapping under the
And what
nose
you
and
mean
the
is,
eyes and all that stuff. I would be able
doing
to
the
just
finger points. Is that what you meant?
yeah, like do
Yeah.
the fingertips, and we were able to transfer the major actions of tapping into minor actions that would appear normal in the context of the routine. So that if I started to have a buildup of anxiety or get tight, then I would have a tool to loosen me up in the moment. And that is where it all started. So my therapist was really the one to introduce me to that, and it was very, very effective. And what was kind of fascinating was watching other competitors who hadn't done that kind of work really let the pressure get to them. And I'm not going to name names or anything like that, because if I hadn't done this work, I would have been a gibbering mess in that. But I attribute a large portion of any success I've had at this high level competition to my therapist correctly recognizing the way to approach this and introduce me to tapping. And since then, I've had other issues with like panic attacks while driving and stuff like that. And we were able to use tapping therapy to help to overcome some of that stuff. And so I don't have to do it as much anymore, but it was a very effective when we were looking at, preparing to get the headspace right for a competition.
Yeah. I believe I recall, as you were kind of recapping the entire experience, you had issues getting that specifically made table across the border to you and all of that sort of stuff. What was that like, kind of dealing with that thing that was out of your control that all of a sudden made it harder?
So in the week leading up to the competition, I had gone to another magic convention to perform the act to get myself under, as much duress as possible to learn to control my anxiety. And one of the things I learned a week prior to traveling to Quebec was that the Toronto Pearson Airport was having major baggage handling issues, because this was still sort of at the tail end of COVID, and they had lots and lots of people who were still sick and couldn't make it to work. And so something in the order of thousands of bags were being delayed. And
I can remember seeing the pictures of baggage claim when that was going on in Toronto.
Yeah. And so I knew that I was flying through Toronto Pearson Airport, and there was no way to go to a different airport. And lots of airports were having this issue, but it was the really large international ones that were the main ones. So it was your LaGuardias, your McCarran airports, your Toronto Pearsons. The really big ones were the ones that were having the issues. And so we did two things to ameliorate this. One, I invested in Apple AirTags and had them in everything. And then the second thing we did was we took very precise measurements of the table that I had built, and I'm pretty handy. And we looked at all of the hardware that went into it and made very detailed plans that we put in a Google document that could be easily accessible. And then we figured out what items would be difficult to source up there. And the one thing that was going to be a problem was pool table felt, because everything else I could go to a Lowe's, a Home Depot, any sort of big box hardware store and get the things I needed, buy power tools, set up a shop in my hotel room, and construct an identical table if I needed to. So we got the pool table felt and we put it in my carry-on, which went with my suit, my special cards, and my sort of arts and crafts kit that I travel with when I'm going to do this act. And and sure enough, as we were taking off from Toronto to Quebec, I watched the AirTag stay in Pearson Airport on the tarmac, and I watched as we flew away from it. And so in a competition like that, it's many, many days. And so when you're going to perform, and I wasn't going to be performing until Friday. So And I arrived Monday. So I kind of knew how long I had. And I was like, well, I know bags are getting to people. It's just taking a bit longer for it to get there. So we filed a claim with the airport. We kind of watched the bag as it went and, had the air tag going. And but midday Wednesday was when we sort of set a deadline. Oh, I might have to go build a new table. And midday Wednesday is right around the time the table showed up. It was, if I'd had the table earlier, could I have done better? Maybe taken first place or second place? I don't necessarily think so. Did I miss out on some rehearsal time? Yeah, but that's not necessarily the good or bad thing. The preparation, knowing ahead of time that this could be an issue, and knowing that there was a contingency plan in place to go build a new table, made it less of a stressful thing.
Gotcha.
And so it just kind of meant that I couldn't get into my head over rehearsing or thinking about stuff ahead of time. And so the way to deal with the anxiety for that was to go, what are all of the possible things that can go wrong and how can I deal with it? And at the end of the day, if what it means is that I've got to use a different table or even use a table provided by the competition and not my custom one, then I would just have to confront that as it happened. And so it was the preparation led to the lack of anxiety.
Gotcha. That's awesome. What's the thing that surprised you the most learning about yourself as you're going through this process?
Learning to control anxiety on a massive level was the big thing. And not just learning to control the anxiety, but to control the anxiety without medication, just with sort of sheer force of will, which has allowed me to do, a lot of other things and go, look, I did this one giant thing. It's possible to do other things. And then the other thing that was like surprising was, once you're done with it, you're sort of like left going, well, what do you do now? And trying to figure out what the next thing you want to do is an interesting thing that you don't really know how to prepare for. And I don't think there is a good way to prepare for I did this giant thing. What do I do next? Sit back, relax, and figure out, who you are after this. So it's, there's definitely things that I regret along the way. But going through them made me a better person. So it's just, it just kind of is what it is. So,
yeah. And so have you figured out what the next big thing to throw creative energy into is?
Oh, it was transitioning from close up to stage. As
Gotcha.
we speak, I'm doing a theater run right now, and focusing on getting that show together and good has been, a lot of interesting, fun, fulfilling work. And now I'm, actively looking to build a second show that I can do. It'll be like my third full length show. I've got a full formal close up show, and now I've got a full formal stage show. And I'm looking to have a second full formal stage show so that I can do other things like, try my hand at a cruise ship to see if that's interesting. Right. And then, continuing to, develop my own material and figure out, the stuff that I want to do, and, not sort of rest on my laurels. And so I'm kind of getting back into that now. So, continuing to work for, my employer, Penguin Magic, and work on those new routines and learn new magic and develop new magic and work with other performers to help them out. And then the most recent thing is helping to find the next team for North America, encouraging others to compete, sort of walking them through the, Byzantine set of rules and where to apply and all the stuff that you have to do to understand what you're getting yourself into. Because I would not have been able to do what I did without a number of people holding my hand all the way through. And now I find myself being the one holding the hand. So it's, the answer is just continuing to move forward in this insane creative endeavor that is being a magician or niche public figure.
Right. And so as you're helping folks, finding Team North America going forward,
Mhm.
how much time have you or are you going to be talking about all the stuff that we've talked about, the mindset, that sort of like, how do you have a conversation with someone who is really fixated on the technical expertise that they have spent years, decades, a lifetime doing? Like, what do those conversations look like? How interested are you having those with them?
A lot of it is very similar to the conversation we're having now. There's
Mhm.
two individuals who I won't name on this, but who I've sort of been working with
Mhm.
and going like, how can we make you better? And the thing I've told both of them is what you need to do is not focus on your moves. Not saying don't practice, but
Right.
you've gotten to this point. This stuff is fine. Where you lack preparation is the mindset. So let's figure out ways to put you in really uncomfortable situations and do your act so that you end up getting, the shakes or the yips or whatever you want to call it to learn how to control that, because you can't control that in your bedroom or your office. You can't.
Right.
It's difficult to do that. One of the interesting things about tapping therapy is that whoever is leading you into it tries to build up your anxiety and put you into the high anxiety, high stress mindset of whatever it is you're going to be doing tapping therapy on. And
Yep.
then they use the tapping and the affirmations to go through to bring all of that down and retrain your brain and your body. And it's just, there's only so much you can do in those situations when you're in the nice controlled environment versus the uncomfortable environment. And so we've been working to figure out how to get these people into uncomfortable environments. One of the individuals has got, a nightly show where they're doing their act. Well, it's actually a bad place for them to practice that because
Right.
they're so comfortable in this environment. So we've tried to put them in some really unusual situations that they're not used to. Whereas another individual is pretty used to performing in front of magicians because they're very active in their local scene. So how do we get them to be uncomfortable? Because competition is such an artificial environment. So doing strange things to throw them through the gauntlet is the interesting preparation that has nothing to do with method or skill,
Right.
because that's if you're working at a very high level, you've already got that stuff figured out. So where you actually have to get creative is in how to cause yourself anxiety so that you can learn how to work through the anxiety.
I mean, I found my way to tapping to manage my own social anxiety. I was as comfortable as could be on stage.
Yeah.
And so I started online dating. And when I lived in Baltimore at the time, literally would just walk to the date, doing it on the way because I was going into the place that was super, super uncomfortable to just because, like you said, there's only so much anxiety I can create imagining being in that circumstance in the safety of working with a skilled practitioner whose job it is to create the safe space for me so I can go there. Like, to create agitation in that is hard. So I love the fact that you're like thinking through how do we take away the safety net to the place for them specifically, not in general, and recognizing that each of us have a unique place and what that looks like.
It gets back to what we talked about in the very beginning. Ultimately, what you're doing is learning that failure is an option and is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Right. And so you have to look for these situations that are where both of those things are true, where there are some stakes and that is what gives you the anxiety. But if you fail, it's like a safe way of failing. And so that's really what you're looking for. And figuring out that situation is incredibly difficult to figure it out. Right. I mean, when I started having panic attacks while driving, there was a plan to let's put me in a road simulator, or like in a driving simulator to create that anxiety.
Right.
Well, I play a lot of video games, and that's something I do to unplug my brain. So it doesn't work at all. It doesn't give me that sense of anxiety because instead of like feeling anxiety, I'm like looking for like where can I like jump off a ramp to try and jump
Right.
into first place, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that doesn't work, right?
Right.
And so it's the same with other folks, right? And just getting creative in that element is an important skill to learn.
Awesome. Well, Erik, while you're on the road, I really appreciate the fact that you've carved out some time to share your experience. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
So I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. It turned out so much better than I thought it was going to. I learned so much in that conversation. If you are interested in Erik and his work and the present performance that we were talking about, if you look in the show notes, you'll actually see a link to his FISM performance, so you can get a chance to see the magic in all of its glory. It is a spectacular and funny presentation. Also, if Erik Tait is anywhere near you, you need to go see him live. It is absolutely amazing. Like I said, he is funny. He is wonderful. He is a great, great, great magician. You, even if you're not the biggest magic fan in the world, you will have an absolutely wonderful time. If you know someone in your life who could appreciate a conversation like this, please pass it along. Like we always say, our marketing budget is your word of mouth. And there might be someone in your life who needs a little encouragement to try something harder in their life, to overcome a little bit of failure. Pass this along to them. And the best part is, even if they don't listen to this particular conversation, the fact that you've reached out to them and said, hey, you might enjoy this, is going to make their day a little bit brighter. I know that sounds super cheesy, because it is super cheesy, but it is also true. As you look at the screen right now, you will see the entire archive of the Tapping Q&A podcast. Click on that playlist, go back, learn some more, and I look forward to talking with you and tapping with you again real soon.